Welcome to the Internet Chess Club. Checkmate.
Welcome to Continuing Dragon series. Today we'll start with Bishop g5 on move 13, what used to be the main position. Let's go quickly to that position and start discussing it a little bit. Remember, theory is changing every few years, every decade. So we're basically talking about a line that used to be extremely popular in the 80s, but we can still see recent games played by very strong grandmasters in this line. Castle, rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5, h4, h5, and here we looked bishop h6 was last time subject, bishop g5. This is the very main move of this opening. Black's main move here is a interesting one and would seem very weird unless you're familiar with this position. Rook c5. This move both allows b5 and pressure on the c file in some situations, and also some weird ideas of the rook defending the fifth rank. So this rook c5 is a multi-purpose move in that position, such a critical and base one. Knight h7 was played in several games, but after bishop h6, basically white is playing bishop h6 only when the knight on h7 must be a better version for white than the usual one. Games such as LeBron Miles, white won quite easily. Tal against Mishta in 1973, Geller Kuzmin, USSR Championship 1978. All those games proved to be just very easy for white. Another move is knight c4 after bishop g5 and queen e2. There are several possibilities here. Mainly, let's look at knight a5. If b5, it was played in several games, just take the pawn this way is just the simplest way that white is better. It was played in some games. But knight a5 is definitely a very interesting alternative. And I'm going to show you one extremely masterpiece type of a game played between Nan and Mastel. King b1, a6. Actually, take on b3 and rook e8 is definitely a possibility for black. It was played in a game Bilyavsky-Ubilava, Minsk, 1983. Queen d2. Going back to that idea, right? Without the bishop, black has no attack. White is just better. Let's put this almost as a critical principle. No darks for bishop. White should be better unless we are exchanging the queens. Then it's about equal endgame in most cases. So this was the game. Very complicated, but black seems fine. So take on b3 is maybe an interesting possibility if black wants to just look at this line and prepare it. Not so much theory and maybe possible to play. a6, trying to push for b5, g4, e5. And here, Geller against Miles in Linares 1983. The game went this way. A very typical piece sacrifice in many Sicilians, actually, we see those. But it seems that black is okay in that type of position. This was Geller Miles. White won, but black seems to be fine. Take on h5. That's an improvement. Take on d4. Knight d5. So this is basically what white is aiming. A piece down, but this will just lead to a massacre. That king is not going to survive much more. So take on b3 first, and maybe after it going after the knight. This is one idea, but in pretty amazing way, white is not capturing back. If you can, well, think for a second, try to guess white's next move. h6. What a position. 2 pieces down. 2. But black is basically losing here. After bishop h8, this is extremely powerful for white, trying to get this knight, and white is about winning here. The game wasn't a big improvement for black. Bishop b5. Queen goes to h2. d3. Take. Take. And black resign. This was None against Mastel, London, 1986. One of the most beautiful games, and just incredible position. Really, when people ask what's so magical sometimes about the dragon, this type of position. Okay, so knight c4 is possible, but maybe eliminating the bishop and playing rook e8. That's a possibility, although it is highly unpopular, so it's still possible to prepare. Rook c5. Basically here there are 4 main moves for white. King b1, g4, we will discuss those moves in the future. Today we're going to discuss 2 other alternatives, f4 and rook h e1. f4 is somewhat a newer move. Let's start first with the old move, rook h e1. Rook h e1, b5, queen a5 is, well, okay, first of all, ideas such as knight c4 are really wrong. Just takes and e5. Those are very basic ideas. One of the main reasons why white's bishop is on g5, it attacks the knight, and the bishop on d7 is under great trouble. Rook c7 and rook takes e5. White is clearly better. Varvin against Terentiev, 1997. We're gonna hear this name Varvin a lot. He's played this line a lot with the white pieces. Some other possibilities are the knight c4, queen a5, king b1, and rook e8. f4. For example, another game by Varvin, knight eg4 and e5, and white is much better in this position. This is Varvin against Brodsky from 1997 as well. The main idea here is that after pawn takes e5, white has the very, very powerful idea. Bishop takes f7, knight b3, then take on c5, take first here, and the bishop is lost. So this is one idea, or take immediately on e5 is also very powerful. Black has to be very careful where he's placing his pieces in those type of positions. Very easily he can reach a much worse position. So f4, knight c4, takes, And this was actually quite an unclear position. Let's follow the main game that we have Bilyavsky against Kirill Georgiev. We mentioned Georgiev many times regarding this opening. And black is absolutely fine in this position after f5. White cannot really organize his pieces despite black weakness. The game ended soon in a draw. It was Vikanzi 1985. So even such a play might be possible, although b5 is a much more popular move these days. f4, knight c4. There were other tries, but not very successful for black, with either b4 immediately. Just knight d5 is very powerful for white. Or ideas even such as knight eg4, and again e5. This break is so powerful, and if takes, pawn take, if knight takes, just take again on e5, and too many things will be under attack. That pin on the d file is critical in this bishop g5 variation. That's very important to remember. Knight c6, sorry, rook takes c5, knight c6 is clearly better. It was played in Dubenko against Bobilev, Correspondence 1987. b5, f4, knight c4, take on c4. And here, well, black can either take with the pawn or with the rook. Personally, I almost always think that taking this way, almost, no, not always, but in many cases, is just wrong. It's the attack on the b file is not as easy as trying to put pressure on the c file. So we will look tiny bit at this move and then go back to rook takes c4. But in this position, white seems to be, after pawn take, just very fine. Bishop takes f6. It's said that Karpov, it's a game of Karpov that we're gonna see. Karpov-Susonkov from Tilburg 79. Karpov thought for 45 minutes before playing this move. e5 was the move played before, but after the very surprising queen b6, this is an idea we're going to see a lot. Black just got a very fast attack here. Take, rook b8, threatening mate, and then capture on f6. The bishop is trapped. This was in Bersazi-Susonko 1977. Black is clearly better. So Karpov, after 45 minutes, comes with this very powerful move, either a novelty or on the board, prepared novelty or on the board move. I'm not sure, but definitely spent lots of time thinking about this move. Bishop takes and e5. Take on h4 just opens more files and lines for white, capture, and everything is collapsing for black. And after bishop g7, which was played e6, it turns out that in this position black's weaknesses are much more severe than white's. Take, take, queen a5, queen e3, take on c3, pawn takes c3, and Karpov won this within a few moves. Quite an impressive idea. Bishop takes f6, getting rid of this bishop, and Susonko, a great dragon expert, faced just an incredible player. So this was bishop takes c4. Rook takes c4 is definitely more in the spirit of the position. For example, take, take, e5, trying to repeat the same idea. But now look at the rook and the c file. Not that easy for this pawn to move forward. Knight c takes b5, queen b8, and black has full compensation. Pair of bishops, the b and the c file are open. This was none against Miles, London 1980, and Miles won with the black pieces. e5 immediately, b4, take on f6. If queen d3, which is another possible move, I'll just mention this idea as an extremely interesting one. Remember, many times this bishop gets trapped, and if bishop takes f6 with the idea to win that bishop, black has a classic intermediate move. Queen b8, first threatening mate and getting out of the pin. Take on c3 and just take here with a big advantage. Well, black is basically close to winning here. So, take on f6, pawn takes f6, queen d3. It is also, it's not going to be a huge difference, by the way, if take queen e2. Those positions will be somewhat similar. Queen d3, rook takes d4, queen takes d4, and pawn takes on c3 with a very unclear position. This is Rowley against Kudrin, San Paulo, 1981. For example, after queen takes d6, take on g5, queen takes d7, queen a5, and black has enough play here. I mean, white king is absolutely not safe. Let's see this line. Queen takes d6, take, queen a5. The king is absolutely not safe here. Another possibility for black, and those are just very interesting ones, is, for example, if he had taken immediately here, queen e2, rook takes d4, takes on e7, rook takes d1. This is pretty interesting because it looks like black is losing material, but in fact he just has quite serious compensation here. For example, this position, the light square bishop hitting those squares is extremely powerful, and white king is weak, so this is very playable for black. So as a conclusion, rook h e1 line is probably not enough based on correct play by black, which includes b5, f4, and rook takes c4, not b takes c4 as was played by Sosonko against Karpov, met very strongly with takes and e5, e6. Okay, so as we said, rook h e1 used to be the main move, but today people prefer more to look at the f4 lines right away, and that's what we are here and we're going to look at. So going back to position after move 14, f4. Okay, knight c4 is quite clearly the main move, but there's some other alternatives without analyzing them too deeply. Knight c6, not one of the good alternatives. e5, remember this opening of the d file, I mention it almost every time it is, because that's in the heart of that position. and if take on c6, and then take on f6, and then take this guy. So after e5, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and just white is basically winning. Zuckerman against Kudrin, New York, 1979. Probably one of the earliest tournaments Kudrin played in America. Knight e, g4 is another possibility. Rook h e1. This is actually quite an interesting line to look. Queen a5. Fighting for the fifth rank in a very funny way, and this was played between some very, very strong players. For example, knight f3, bishop c6. This is just fine for black. This was all against Shabalov, Tbilisi, 1989. A way more complicated game was f5. Takes, rook e8, knight d5, queen d2, rook takes d2, king f8, a4, b6. Very tough position. White has pair of bishops, but black has some key squares for his knights, and it's very important to know knight needs key strategic squares. This was a game between Kamsky and Ivanchuk. Definitely players worth mentioning. Buenos Aires, 1994. The game ended in a draw. Maybe objectively, maybe white is tiny better in that type of position, but practically it's just a game. So this knight g4 is an interesting possibility. Let's put it that way. Alrighty, knight c4, our main move. Knight c4, queen d3, and here black has basically two possibilities, b5 or knight g4. Knight g4 used to be, well, considered quite okay, and actually leading to a very interesting forced endgame. Not forced, but a very interesting endgame. Let's first of all see the idea. There's a knight, so let's first of all see what happens if we take it. Knight f2. And now too many pieces are hanging here if white moves these pieces. So bishop back to b3. The knight still cannot move anywhere. Queen b6. This is interesting to see how theory again develops. First of all, bishop g4, which is quite a recent move, not such an incredible alternative, but an interesting nonetheless. And queen a5. Bishop g4 is an interesting alternative. This is quite a messy position, which, well, seems to be quite reasonable for black. Again, deep analysis of this position is needed, and if black can survive, maybe he can, he is okay here. But to play this without very deep analysis is wrong. This was Ernest against Essendorf, Hamburg 2005. White won this one, but highly unclear position here. Previous games were a5 was played there. Queen d6 is the main move, another game of Tivyakov, which we will see in a minute. f5, a4, bishop d3, queen e8, and here a very powerful move would have been queen e3, simply defending the knight and escape squares. Adams played g4 right away, but that was quite wrong. And after queen e3, it's just the wrong timing. e6, and Tivyakov won this within a few moves. This is Adams Tivyakov Occam 1990, a tournament that doesn't exist anymore, but used to be basically the top tournament for under 20, basically 20-something in the world. Great players like Anand, Ivanchuk actually played in this tournament, which was won by Ilan Manor from Israel before all those guys. Alright, so this is a5, queen b6, and here knight f3. This was played by a player named Anand against same Tivyakov. We can see Tivyakov play this against everyone, not much fear there. Take on g5, and this position is quite unclear. Actually, one game was Anand Tivyakov, another game was Anand Georgiev. They are not so critical, but okay. Queen d1, queen e3, king b1. Both games were exactly the same. And in his game against Georgiev from Reggio Emilia 1988, Anand played this move and a draw was shortly agreed. Against Tivyakov he played queen e1 and actually lost. So basically Tivyakov is very comfortable playing those positions. It was actually not an extremely powerful player that showed Tivyakov that maybe it's problematic to play this position. f5. That's so interesting. We see Anand, we see Adams, but after their work, there comes the other players that can really see and do the work and improve, even on such great players. Take on g6, queen g1, knight d1. Basically everything is forced here. Takes, queen d2. And yes, here we are in an endgame that supposed to be tiny better for white. Tiny better for white, mainly due to the possibility to create a pass pawn here. A bishop is stronger than the knight. Oops, that pass pawn. And this was Klovan's against Tivyakov, Groningen 1991. So Anand tried in 1988 against Georgiev, in 1989 against Tivyakov. Adams played in 1990 against Tivyakov. Everything was fine. This line, 1991, showed that black should probably hold a draw here, but people say it's more comfortable to play with white, and I think so too. Alright, another idea though, played by a very fresh grandmaster, Leon Hoyes, Ivanchuk's assistant, if I'm correct. He played after knight g4, knight d5, which is an interesting idea. I actually think that the simplest and most principled move is just rook e8 and playing this again. Too many pieces will be hanging and it's just going to be a big mess to calculate and look. Definitely rook e8 is possible. Knight f2, queen e2, and here basically black lost the game in one move. Black should have played rook takes d5, queen takes f2, and white has nice game here, nice, but white is no more than somewhat better here. I wouldn't say much better, maybe just somewhat more comfortable to play, not much more. In the game, black took here, and basically that's it. Knight takes c7 and knight takes g6. This is game over, and this is Leon Hoyes against Alfonso Moyenzo, Havana, Cuba, 2007. So, quite a recent game, and definitely we can count that white has done some work on this line. Alrighty, going back, let's go again. h5, bishop g5, rook g5, f4, knight g4, either an endgame like Klovan's against Tivyakov, which somewhat favors white, or Knight d5 is an interesting idea. b5. Alrighty. e5 is the main move. And knight g4 is the main move. But also an interesting move such as knight h7 was played. I don't think it's such a powerful move, but definitely an interesting one. We will see. Knight d5, definitely something to look, although not too much. Alright, let's start a bit. Knight h7, well, eliminating this bishop definitely seems like something anyone should be looking at. Knight d takes b5, knight takes g5, h takes g5, bishop f5. That probably should have been the correct way with highly complex position. Knight a5 was played, and here, well, white should just win simply by taking on d6 and taking again, and black really doesn't have so much here. Like, for example, something like that, and the king goes. It should be just almost winning for white. But white, an interesting player, let's put it that way, played knight takes d6. Maybe just tiny bit too much. Take. I mean, white is still better here, but I'm not sure it was necessary to play that way. And g4. And I will say that white won in a great style, and people that know me knows that this guy is one of my heroes, Ivanchuk, playing with the white pieces against Felger, Barcelona 2005. But I still think that just simply pawn takes d6 would have been much stronger. Okay, knight d5. Just knight e4 is basically, it's extremely powerful for white. A new move played really very recently was queen c8. Pretty incredible, right? I mean, basically black is saying there is no threat on f6. It was probably interesting to take right away on b5. In the game, white first took on f6, took back, take, and played knight e4. White is better here, but it's very complicated, this type of position, and the game led to a draw. I mean, this is a target. This was Fernandez Romero against Carlson, not Carlsen, Carlson, Espanyol 2008. So we see some strong 2500 plus players playing those positions, coming with new ideas. Queen c8, maybe just okay. I think this is extremely critical to analyze if one wishes to play this position. So queen d3, b5, e5, knight g4. Okay, take on d6 is obviously the first move, and that's what we're gonna see. For example, knight e4 was played, and here even rook d5 is such an interesting position. This was played Lubojevich Miles, actually several games. Let's start. The first one in 1979 was rook d5, knight takes d6, take, and look at that incredible position. White is better here. Too many pieces. Miles won with the black pieces, but white is better here. really, really many pieces. So, a year after it, in 1980, Miles played rook to c8. Take on d6, f6, and here, rook h e1, take on d6, and an incredibly messy position, which might favor white after f5, but well, let's just call it really complicated, messy position, because it is. This is Lubavitch Miles, 1980. 17 years after this game, Tiemann tried to improve for white and played knight c3 here. Black must take on g5 with the usual messy position, but his opponent played knight f2, and basically that's almost game over. Tiemann against Schenk, 1986. Sorry, I thought it was 1997, so according to my calculations it's only 6 years after 1980. Okay, take on d6. Here black has several possibilities. Basically, knight takes d6 should be considered the main move, or should be a major alternative. And after queen takes g6, that's pretty crazy position. Knight goes back to c4. If queen takes h5, knight f2, it's a really mess. Our white pieces are hanging as well, and remember this rook protecting many attacking ideas by white. Also bishop g4 wanting to trap the queen. So instead of queen takes h5, it might be better for white's queen to go back to e4. Knight f2, queen takes e7. And here, queen c8. Probably this position is better for white after a move such as knight e4, but it's definitely a very messy position that needs... Well, actually, knight takes e4 is wrong, because takes, and white queen is under a problem. Rook d5 or bishop g4. So this is one messy position here, which black seems to be maybe even much better if white cannot find a move. Those positions haven't been explored so much yet, and maybe it's up to you to do that work. So knight takes d6 is our idea. Rook takes g5 was played, and I actually, to be honest, I don't think that's a correct move. White took like that, queen e2, knight takes d1, rook takes d1, knight takes d6 and queen d3, and white was better here. Klovans, we mentioned him before beating Tivyakov. Now he won this game in 1987 against Ivanchuk. That's not really a bad score to start with, winning with white against the dragon against Tivyakov and Ivanchuk. But I think that he could have played even much stronger. I think in this position, f take g5 is much stronger. The pressure against the f7 pawn is very, very powerful here. Alrighty. And also knight f2. It's possible to take on b5. Alright. To go to the bottom of it, because we saw many lines and very complicated position, and trust me, I deleted much more material just to make it reasonable. Bishop g5 is what we're going to also be looking in our next videos. The bishop leaves e3, so the knight is not going to hit it, and the bishop itself puts lots of pressure. Rook c5 The rook is extremely dominant on the 5th rank and supporting b5. f4 or rook a g1, what we saw today, basically not far away from one another. And those positions are very interesting. Either e5, f5. There is more work to do here. It seems that the strongest players, though, believe that black is quite okay here. That's why they are looking for other alternatives. But definitely there is more work to be done here. Our next video will include king b1, just a very principled preparation move, preparing the attack, and we will see some strong games from 08, including Carlsen and company playing those. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.